It's budget season for the government, and allocations in the millions and billions of dollars have been directed to key projects. In the show today, we look at funding for the Ministry of National Security and social protection measures to reform contract employment of public sector workers. These and so much more within the half hour. This is Jamaica Magazine, and I'm your host, Theodore Henry.
Greatness is in your bones.
I'm unstoppable. I'm a vulture with no brains. I'm invincible. Yeah, I win every single game.
We're looking for great things this season. And I know you believe it within your very core. And so we have committed to continue the support behind you and in front of you and beside you so that you can excel and you can do well. And you can be your best self.
I'm unstoppable. I'm a vulture with no brains. I'm invincible. Yeah, I win every single game.
Good day, I'm Stephen McHugh, and this is your JIS News for Thursday, March 9, 2023. Government will be implementing a $40 billion island-wide road infrastructure program called Shared Prosperity through Accelerated Improvement to a Road Network, SPARK. Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark, made the announcement while opening the budget debate on Tuesday. SPARK will be executed over a 3-year period, with project development to begin in the upcoming 2023-24 fiscal year and implementation in the following financial year. It's being implemented under the theme Modernizing Our Roads for Our Shared Prosperity.
We estimate that over 2,000 roads across Jamaica will be able to be rehabilitated through this SPARK project.
The SPARK program will not be constituency-based, but members of Parliament will have the opportunity to make input and representation for their communities. The initiative will be fully funded by the government and evaluated under the Public Investment Management System, PIMS. Minister Clark says focus will be on secondary roads, with attention also given to some main roads and major thoroughfares that require rehabilitation to reduce the likelihood of road collisions. In other news from Parliament, the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries will be importing about 6,000 goats, sheep and pigs over the next 3 years to assist small ruminant and pig farmers. The measure is intended to improve local food security, reduce importation of animal feed, and support income generation and employment, particularly for farmers in rural Jamaica.
They will be for breeding, Madam Speaker, and to boost our local supplies. These will not be slaughtered for the consumer market. The Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries will import and distribute the animals in breeding clusters, and private farmers will qualify to import their own.
While making his budget debate presentation on Tuesday, the finance minister announced that in support of this initiative, government would be eliminating GCT on the importation of small ruminants and pigs. The Agriculture Ministry will be importing the live animals over a 5-year period commencing in fiscal year 2023-24. In the meantime, the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries will be spending $903 million to build a modern, biosecure, climate-resilient tilapia hatchery on the island. The hatchery will be built at Twickenham Park in St. Catherine through the National Fisheries Authority. It is being done as a component of the Promoting Community-Based Climate Resilience in the Fisheries Sector (PCCR) project. Portfolio Minister Pernell Charles Jr. says the hatchery is a sound investment for the country as it seeks to meet the consumer demand for fish.
The type of innovation and the modernization that comes from the building of this hatchery will permit us to achieve the demand, or at least to meet most of the demand. We are now under 2 million fry, and this will push us to 5 million.
The minister was addressing a stakeholders' validation meeting held recently in St. Catherine. The new hatchery will feature a recirculating aquaculture system that will use 10% less water than traditional hatchery systems. Government is looking to increase the cadre of public sector leaders who are knowledgeable in financial management. The training and exposure of personnel will be facilitated through the establishment of a fiscal research institute. The government is providing an initial $200 million in grant funding to the University of the West Indies, UWI, for the formation of the institute within the Department of Economics. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark made the announcement in Parliament earlier this week.
If we are to command our own ship, Madam Speaker, and to command it sustainably and independently, then a large increase in the supply of graduates specializing in public finance is a national imperative. In addition, generations of public sector leaders will need better exposure to and training in financial management.
Minister Clark says he intends to secure the private sector's support in endowing the chair of the institute in collaboration with the UWI. The Fiscal Research Institute will be a non-partisan think tank engaged in conducting rigorous high-level research, teaching, and training in public finance and public policy. It will offer courses in public finance and public financial management at the undergraduate and graduate levels. The institute will analyze and inform economic and social policy decisions such as public expenditure, taxation, and fiscal sustainability. This is to help policymakers and the general population understand the impact of public choices on individuals, households, firms, and the government's financial position.
While we'll always be able to benefit from the advice of multilateral partners, the Jamaica project becomes unsustainable without increased domestic capacity for public finance management, training, analysis, and research. We must preserve and maintain the gains.
The country's new banknotes will be in circulation in another 3 months. Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark, says implementation will take effect by mid-June. The Bank of Jamaica will develop a full public relations campaign for the new banknotes.
The timeline for the issuance of the new notes into circulation requires the banks to complete the adaptation of their automated banking machines and other equipment. The process is advanced. We expect testing in May with a view of full implementation by June of 2023.
The upgrade of Jamaican banknotes was announced last year, along with the introduction of a new $2,000 denomination. The new notes will use the latest in material technology to make them more durable. And finally, government will be speeding up the passage of amendments to gender-based legislation in the new fiscal year. Prime Minister Andrew Holness made the announcement on International Women's Day during a breakfast event at Jamaica House. He says the legislative amendments will address the issue of gender-based violence in the society.
We have taken the decision that we will put those issues, we'll bring them back, the amendments to the Offences Against the Person, the Domestic Violence Act, those legislation which have already been reviewed and debated and the amendments even drafted, that we're going to bring them back now on the front burner and have them dealt with.
He says discussions are also being held on related matters, including financing for the construction of more shelters to treat victims of gender-based violence. Meanwhile, host of the Women's Breakfast event, Member of Parliament for East Rural St. Andrew, Juliet Holness, is calling for the protection of women.
Safety and security is also a concern for many women in Jamaica. We need to spend some time thinking about how we can further protect women and girls against physical abuse, social and economic risk, and think about how we can reduce some of those traditional forms of discrimination against women.
And that's it for JIS News Today. I'm Stephen McHugh. Thanks for watching.
Unsure of when you should apply for your NHT contributions refund? This is your reminder. The National Housing Trust, NHT, is now accepting refund applications for contributions made in 2015. Here is what you need to know. Eligible contributors must apply online. Customers may apply for their refund via NHT's website at nht.gov.jm or through its mobile app, NHT Mobile. The NHT has extended the cash refund granted to eligible public sector workers for 2023. For more information, you may visit their website, nht.gov.jm, send an email to wecare@nht.gov.jm or call 876-929-6500 or 888 225-5648. The National Housing Trust, the key to your home.
Government is embarking on a reform of contract employment within the public sector. This will benefit very important low-skilled workers and place them in permanent employment with access to pension. This was a major point in the budget presentation on Tuesday by Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark. Here's a recap.
I want to turn my attention to the long-standing issue of fixed-term contracts in government. First, let me acknowledge that fixed-term contracts have their rightful place. They are useful for employment that is designed to be temporary in nature. They're also useful in executive appointments. Over the last 3 decades or so, ministries, departments, and agencies, there's been a growing tendency for the abuse of fixed-term contracts outside of the establishment as a method of staffing organizations. We did not start the problem, Madam Speaker, but this government will begin and advance the process to address this problem. In sharing the gains of economic reform and recovery, the government will regularize evergreen, consistently renewed contract workers, Madam Speaker, and move them into structured employment. The Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, through its Strategic Human Resource Department, will move to address the situation, Madam Speaker. The problem is so large and complex that it cannot all be fixed at once. And under the reform of contract work in the public sector program, we will approach this in a phased basis, working on one or few areas at a time until we accomplish the task. And we will engage with our union partners in developing a realistic timeline. One of the places we will begin with the reform for contract work in the public sector is in the Ministry of Education. There are approximately 716 cooks and 52 assistant cooks who are presently employed on contract without postcodes. Cooks at the primary level are usually engaged on contract, and they work for periods when schools are in session. And based on this arrangement, they're not eligible for pension even after 10 to 20 years. This government is going to resolve this long-standing issue. We'll create the postcodes required to elevate 716 cooks and assistant cooks in our school system from contract work to permanent employment, Madam Speaker. There are 367 regular watchmen who are working in our schools, who are working on contract without postcodes. We will create postcodes required to elevate 367 regular school watchmen who work full-time hours to elevate them, Madam Speaker, from contract work to permanent work, Madam Speaker. In our school system, we have 659 caregivers in our infant schools who are on contract work. We will elevate them, Madam Speaker, to permanent employment, Madam Speaker. There are over 8,000 just in the school system alone. And this government, Madam Speaker, will bring long-awaited reform in this area and improve the lives, Madam Speaker, as we share the gains. I've come into knowledge of and observed for myself a special group who have been wronged for far too long. And this government will respond to their cry for justice. I am speaking about workers at the National Solid Waste Management Agency. We have just under 2,000 workers. That includes sidemen, drivers, sidewomen, landfill workers, sweepers, mechanics, all what them call the enforcement officers, and the other sanitation workers. Today I'm announcing a major shift in how we treat this important category of the public sector workforce. Madam Speaker, in fiscal year 2023-24, we will make sanitation workers at the National Solid Waste Management Agency who have completed the necessary probationary periods into permanent employees. There are approximately 1,754 doctors, as I mentioned earlier. 80% of doctors in the public service are on contract and have to be periodically renewed. And after all those years in medical school, the vast majority of our doctors do not have security of tenure. The suboptimal arrangements for doctors in the public service and contract for extended periods of time will be brought to an end by this government. I cannot in this speech address all of the instances of contract work in government in need of reform. Under the Reform of Contract Work in the Public Sector program, we will dimension the problem, Madam Speaker, and detail the phased implementation of solutions for all. We aim to complete the implementation of the Reform for Contract Work in the public sector within a 3-year period, concluding in the fiscal year 2025-26. Madam Speaker, when we share the gains of economic reform and economic recovery, Madam Speaker, Jamaica is better off. We're using hiring policy to drive social change in our country, Madam Speaker.
Yes, walk right over there and drop it in the bin. Reuse that wastewater from your kitchen for the garden. Get your hands dirty and plant a tree. Farmers, hold off on the pesticides, especially near our rivers. Do your part to protect our watersheds so we can preserve the source of our drinking water. Every act to protect our watersheds counts. Start now.
We turn our attention now to matters of national security and break down how that ministry will be spending its budgetary allocation of over $118 billion.
The Ministry of National Security has received a major increase of over $405 million to finance operational expenses. This is included in the $112.7 billion recurrent budget for the 2023-2024 financial year. The ministry will also spend close to $6 billion on capital projects. Let's give you the breakdown. The ministry will continue with measures to modernize the police force. With $11 million more under this line item, storage facilities will be upgraded. This will enable a more efficient retrieval of information for investigations, narcotics, traffic, criminal records, intelligence, immigration, and personnel. The investigative capacity of the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency (PICA) will also be strengthened. Of the $308 million allocation, $19 million will go towards the purchase of equipment. This will allow PICA more room to detect and prevent fraudulent activities. Meanwhile, strategic attention will be given to public order and crime-fighting activities. At the helm are two major units of the JCF, the Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch (PSTEB) and Counterterrorism and Organized Crime (CTOC). Each receives a sizable increase in allocation.
The money we spend, the work we do must not only be transformative but be sustainable.
Infrastructure development and capacity building is the goal of the 6 capital projects to be undertaken in the 2023-24 financial year. Close to $6 billion is earmarked for these. Among them is the construction of Police Divisional Headquarters in Westmoreland and St. Catherine North. Both projects are being financed through the Consolidated Fund. The facilities are expected to increase the capacity and comfort of officers. The ministry is also within target of completing the Forensic Pathology Autopsy Suite building in the new financial year. 50% of construction has been achieved to date. The facility will increase the forensic capacity of the police force and reduce the backlog of criminal and other cases. $323 million has been set aside for the project through the Consolidated Fund. Also on the agenda is the purchase of patrol vessels for the JDF. This will allow for more monitoring of our marine space. The $3 billion budget will also procure equipment for the vessels, including radar, cameras, software, and hardware.
This strategic collaboration among our security forces for targeted investment in science and technology-driven solutions, the resultant expansion of our security capabilities will positively impact crime in a sustainable way.
As the ministry expands the rollout of technology in its operation, $900 million will purchase equipment for the Cybersecurity Initiatives project. The Jamaica Eye program has been significantly bolstered under this initiative.
The investment in the police force will give them the capacity to do what we expect of them, which is to ensure good quality law and order and efficiency in apprehending and prosecuting criminals.
Government will be spending $770 million in the new fiscal year on the Security Strengthening Project. The funds will be used to complete implementation of a jail management software and installation of a Citizens Service Portal software. It will also allow for the procurement of fiber optic cables for the Jamaica Constabulary Force JCF and equipment for a mobile command center.
We are committed as a country and a government to giving the police the kind of support it requires to become efficient and be more effective.
March is Colon Cancer Awareness Month, and the time is very appropriate to remind you about the disease that affects both men and women, the risk factors, symptoms, and treatment. I'm Theodore Henry. Our focus today is on health, colorectal or colon cancer in particular. It's a disease that affects the large intestines or the bowel, and to help us understand the causes, the risk factors, treatments, among other things, is gastroenterologist Dr. Mike Mills. Welcome to the program, Dr. Mills.
Thank you very much, Theodore.
All right, let's jump right into it and get the facts.
Sure.
Give us a brief overview, first and foremost. What is colon cancer? What causes it?
Okay, so you mentioned that colon is a large bowel, the last part of the digestive system.
Right.
That's correct. And cancer is uncontrolled cell growth of any part of the body. So it's uncontrolled cell growth of parts of the colon or large bowel.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. What causes that? It just happens?
There are a number of risk factors. The most common thing that we identify it with is age. So as you get older, you have an increased risk of colon cancer.
Right.
There's also genetic predisposition. So we know that families can have colon cancer predispositions as well.
Like my father,
That's right, grandparents,
Right.
aunts, brothers, sisters, that type of thing.
Okay.
Outside of that, there's some other lifestyle-related changes. So if the diet, for example, is very poor in fiber, that can be a problem. So a low-fiber diet is not a good idea. If there's a history of smoking, that increases your risk as well. A history of eating a lot of processed meat or red meat also increases the chance of colon cancer.
Wow.
Excessive alcohol also increases the risk.
That's a pretty long list.
It is, and then there are a few other things like medical conditions, polyps, for example, small warty growths in the bowel, ulcerative colitis, which is a type of inflammatory bowel disease, can also become colon cancer.
Oh, so not a direct one-to-one cause, but can become.
Can become. Not all cases progress that way, but we do know that, for example, maybe about 70% of cases really don't have an identifiable risk factor at all. It's just about 30% where there's a direct kind of genetic link. So all these other factors play a role over time.
We're getting the facts. Now, I noticed in your answer that you did not say men.
Yes, that's right. So colon cancer affects the colon, and colons happen to be in both men and women. So everybody has a colon.
Right.
The digestive system is the same in both genders, and so each is affected equally.
Okay. So you mentioned dietary issues, you mentioned lifestyle, you mentioned age.
Yes.
What age are we looking at here?
Okay, so most commonly above the age of 65, this is where we find that the incidence increases significantly. But we do have identified cases as early as in the late 20s all the way up into the early 90s, for example. So it spans the entire spectrum, even though most of them are going to be above the age of 65.
Okay, so you're looking at, it can happen earlier.
It can happen.
Certainly, you want to get ahead of this thing, test for it, screen for it.
Yes, screening is important.
When you reach a certain age.
That's right.
We're going to talk about screening, but before we get there, I wanted to ask about the symptoms. What should I be wary of, especially when I get to a certain age?
Okay, so it doesn't matter the age. If you have any symptoms at all, you need to get that checked out.
Okay,
it doesn't have to be cancer, definitely.
Right.
But the symptoms that we're concerned about would be bleeding, so blood in the stool, for example. That's commonly due to something like hemorrhoids or piles.
Right.
But as you get older, or if it's something which is unusual, then you definitely need to get that checked out because it can be a sign.
Right.
A change in your bowel habit, so that's either constipation or even diarrhea, can be associated with colon cancer as well.
Anything strange about
anything
your normal?
unusual, abdominal pain, for example. If it's very severe weight loss, change in appetite, depending on where it is. If it's spread outside the colon, it can affect other organs. So you can get symptoms associated with the liver, so jaundice or shortness of breath if it goes to the lung, or even can have seizures if it goes to the brain, or bone pain, for example.
Wow, that's a lot, Dr. Mills. That's a wide.
Yes.
So I'm getting that the advice then really would be, don't self-diagnose.
That's right. It's very important. If you do have a symptom, as I said, it's not likely that it's going to be cancer in most cases, but you do need to get it checked out.
Yes.
Because the earlier you check it out, the better it is for you long term.
You know what is up.
That's right.
All right, so we spoke about the symptoms, but I might see something, or better yet, I'm a proactive young man and I decide to get screened and tested. How do you test for this? What do you do as the doctor?
Okay, so if you have a symptom, then definitely you need to do one of the diagnostic tests. For example, a colonoscopy,
Right.
where we pass a camera through the rectum into the large bowel to have a look around to see where the abnormality is coming from, if it's bleeding or otherwise.
Right.
You can also do a CT colonography, which is a special type of CAT scan of the bowel, which looks inside as well. You may also do a barium enema, which is not used for screening, but can definitely identify abnormalities inside the colon, which is a special type of X-ray, for example.
Let's talk about statistics. Jamaica, I did a bit of research leading up to this interview, and I understand that this particular cancer is one of the, if I'm getting my information right, the third
That's right, yes.
leading cancer-related cause
Yes,
of
in
death.
both males and females.
Yes.
So in females, number 1, breast, number 2, cervix, number 3, colon. In males, prostate, then lung, and then colon. In terms of incidence, Jamaica Cancer Registry at University Hospital has documented about 13 to 18 new cases per 100,000 per year. So we do have a moderate incidence of colorectal cancer in the island compared to other countries, and it's something that we do see.
Have the numbers been decreasing, increasing, staying steady?
They've been fairly steady. There's some signaling that maybe in males it might be increasing, and we have a concern as well that in younger individuals it may be increasing as well, but we still need to look at the data in more detail.
We are reminding you to get screened. Don't wait until it turns into something large. Add it to your yearly routine. I'm Theodore Henry. Take good care. This is where our journey ends, but only for today. Join us again tomorrow when we bring you another informative program. In the meantime, stay connected via our website, jis.gov.jm. And while you're online, send your feedback to Jamaica Magazine at jis.gov.jm or via tweet at JIS News. You may also find us on all the major social media platforms and through our mobile app that's both Android and iOS compatible. On behalf of the production crew, I'm Theodore Henry. Take care.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.